What's going on, everyone? I'm back, and today I wanted to start talking about player positional rankings for this 2018 fantasy football season, and specifically talking about the running backs today. More of a PPR format as far as the rankings are concerned, but we'll still talk some standard formats as well. So let's get right into it with my top 25 running back rankings for 2018. Coming in at number 1, I've got David Johnson of the Arizona Cardinals. And let's be honest, guys, this guy can do it all. He is a wide receiver and a running back all rolled into one. He can absolutely get you over 1,000 yards rushing, close to, if not over 1,000 yards receiving, and double-digit touchdowns. Now, obviously, the concern here is how will he bounce back from the injury of last year that forced him to miss all of the season after he got hurt in week 1. Realistically speaking, David Johnson could have come back if the Cardinals were in playoff contention. We all know that. But a wrist injury, I don't anticipating that being a major factor for the 2018 season. I think he's had more than enough time for that to heal back up. And insert now Sam Bradford / Josh Rosen. Personally, I think Sam Bradford will be at the helm of that quarterback position for the majority of the season, if not all of it. And I think, look, David Johnson, the reason I have him at number 1 versus a Le'Veon Bell is because he doesn't have that Antonio Brown that's just as good as him in that offense. Obviously, Larry Fitzgerald is still there, and he's still a stud, but he is not of the Antonio Brown caliber. David Johnson is the unquestioned number 1 guy. I think Sam Bradford or whoever is the quarterback is going to realize that and feed him as much as possible. Look, he's been the number 1 guy for the Cardinals for a couple of seasons, and people have not been able to stop him. He's an absolute beast, and for that reason, I like him as my number 1 running back. At number 2, I've got Le'Veon Bell. And having Bell at the number 2 spot isn't a knock against him or anything like that. It's just my own personal preference of having David Johnson a little bit above Le'Veon Bell. And I think we can all fall into one of these two categories, either Team David Johnson or Team Le'Veon Bell. But the reality is, if these two guys stay healthy, they should finish in the top 2 or top 3 fantasy football players of the season when it's all said and done. And everything we said about David Johnson can be applied to Le'Veon Bell. He is just as good. Honestly, we are splitting hairs when talking about both these guys. Shouldn't worry about either one of them. With Le'Veon Bell, I know the contract talk extensions are always a factor. Maybe a reason why he started out a little bit slower at the start of the season last year, but you saw what he can do. He is a stud. He will be there week in, week out, and he will be a solid running back choice at either the first or second spot. At number 3, I've got Todd Gurley. And let's be honest, if we're basing this off solely performances from last year, Gurley should be the number 1 guy, as he carried so many of us to fantasy football glory last season. The only reason I have him at number 3 is because I think that the Rams offense has so many weapons right now that it's going to take a little bit more for them to distribute the wealth. They've still got Robert Woods, added Brendan Cooks, Cooper Kupp is up and rising, and at the same time, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Jared Goff's progression. Will he continue to rise, or will some teams have figured out the offense of the Rams? Just a couple question marks there that make me have him at number 3. At number 4, I've got Ezekiel Elliott. And with Zeke, we all know the story from last year. Suspended, missed some time, but in 2018, suspended no more, should play an entire season. And I think that translates into a comeback vengeance season for Zeke, where he's going to be out to prove something. On top of that, he will have a lot more receiving opportunities with both Dez Bryant and Jason Witten gone. Also, he still plays behind one of the best offensive lines in all of football that, oh yeah, by the way, they added even more talent in the NFL draft. And also on top of all of this, we have got the Jerry Jones factor. We all know how much he likes to stick it to the NFL. And after they suspended his best player last year, I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to stick it back to them again and says, oh yeah, watch this. I'm going to feature Ezekiel Elliott even more so. I'm going to make him into an MVP candidate by having him be that much of a factor. He's got the connection with Dak Prescott. And honestly, where he's being drafted right now at the 4 spot out of these first couple of running backs, I think that's very good value. If you can get him even later on, even better for you. And pretty much everything we said for the top 3 guys, we can say for him, just maybe not as polished, but I think he is in store for a huge year. Coming in at number 5, I've got Saquon Barkley. And after we get outside of the top 4, we start to see some more question marks, a little bit of a drop in tiers, but not by much, just tier 1A to maybe tier 1B, still excellent running backs. And to me, this is where we make that distinction. After the Ezekiel Elliott transition to, for me, Saquon Barkley. The big question mark for Barkley, obviously, to me, is his rookie status. Will he be able to shed that mark and still produce? We've seen it year in and year out that rookie running backs perform, so there's no reason to think that he won't be able to. But just maybe as big of a question for me is, have the Giants done enough to upgrade that offensive line? They added some free agents, drafted a guy like Will Hernandez in the draft, so the effort has been there. They've needed a running back piece in that organization for a long time. And to me now, the big thing becomes, will Odell Beckham and Saquon Barkley be able to thrive together? I see no reason why that won't be the case. You don't become the number 2 pick overall in the first round at the running back position by coincidence. Saquon is going to get his running opportunities. He's going to get his passing opportunities as well. Just look what David Gettleman did with Christian McCaffrey and the Panthers. He peppered McCaffrey with targets. I think Saquon Barkley will see the same kind of attention. And now, to me, best case scenario, we see something like Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown in New York. And hopefully, I think if everything works out, that's exactly what will happen. At number 6, I've got Alvin Kamara, albeit with a little bit of hesitation, but let me explain. Now, obviously, his status from last year was that of waiver wire darling, and he was able to produce crazy good numbers even while working in tandem with Mark Ingram. Obviously, the Mark Ingram suspension now has a lot of owners jumping for joy and going all in for Kamara, even having him as a top 5 pick. What concerns me here, however, is that the Saints coaching staff themselves have said that his workload is right where they want it to be. They won't be increasing it even with Mark Ingram gone. And just think about this. A lot of his success last year came because he was so good on limited opportunities getting in the end zone. Touchdown performance doesn't necessarily translate year in and year out. That's the hardest stat to project. And when Mark Ingram comes back, that's going to go back to, for the most part, a running back by committee, if everything as far as injuries and things like that aren't a factor. So that's just a little something to consider. Other than that, he is a great runner from what we saw, great pass catcher, which gives him a nice PPR boost, but keep that in mind as far as the workload and timeshare with Mark Ingram is concerned. At number 7, I've got Melvin Gordon, and probably a little bit higher than he finds himself on other lists, but let me explain. Gordon finds himself in a situation right now where he is in his 5th-year option after the Chargers picked it up, and if he wants another big fat contract, this is it. It's now or never. He's going to have to ball out and absolutely knock it out of the park. Now, I don't know if the Chargers plan on re-signing him or not, but I do know they're going to get the most bang out of their buck, and that means if they have to, they're going to run him into the ground because they might or might not re-sign him after this year. Only they know that. But what I do know for a fact is in PPR formats, Gordon gets an extra boost for me. The Chargers offense, very potent through the air, and Gordon has been a good pass catcher. The concern here for me is that the yards per carry aren't necessarily where you want them to be for a top 10 running back. We did see some success as far as touchdowns are concerned last year, an uptick with that. It'll be interesting to see if he keeps up pace in that category. But as far as PPR versus standard formats, I would probably have him a little bit lower in standard leagues. At number 8, I've got Dalvin Cook, and go ahead and put a big asterisk next to this one because the big question here is the ACL injury. And this is what's caused his ranking for me personally to be all over the place. If that injury isn't an issue, I honestly have Dalvin Cook right after Ezekiel Elliott in my rankings, but more than likely there will be some lingering effects. Won't he be able to play right away in week 1? Because let's be honest, right out of the gate, he looked like the best running back out of that 2017 rookie class, even including Alvin Kamara, Leonard Fournette, and Christian McCaffrey. So he has everything going for him if he comes back healthy. He's got a revamped Minnesota offense with Kirk Cousins there. A lot of opportunities. The receiving game should help take pressure off him. So Dalvin Cook, if, and it's a big if, that injury isn't an issue, he will be a great pick. At number 9, I've got Leonard Fournette, and maybe a little bit lower than what some people expected, but the reason for me is that he's not necessarily the best PPR match like some of these other running backs that we've listed have been, because the Jaguars' MO is go ahead, dominate defensively, and then run the football down your throat. Now, obviously, Fournette will be a big part of that, running the football down your throat, but there's no reason for him to get that many passes thrown his way. And the big plus here is that even while he missed some time, he still put together a very good season his rookie year, and he gets a lot of usage in the red zone. Now, don't get me wrong, I still very much so like Leonard Fournette, even as a running back number 1. It's just that in PPR, he slips a little bit for me. However, if this was standard format, I would have him a spot or 2 higher. Rounding out my top 10, I have got Kareem Hunt. And Hunt was the guy that was the fantasy darling of last year for the first few weeks until he went absolutely cold and then found himself again towards the end of the season, which leads to a couple of big questions. One, will we be able to rely on Kareem Hunt week in and week out consistently? And how will his usage trend? Because last year, when the Chiefs were the most successful was when Andy Reid was giving the most amount of opportunities and ran Kareem Hunt often. But when they started struggling is when that usage dipped. So that will be a factor to consider. But probably most importantly will be the Patrick Mahomes factor, because how will his insertion at the quarterback role impact Kareem Hunt? Honestly, I think the way that Patrick Mahomes goes, so will the Kansas City Chiefs, so will Kareem Hunt, which for me gives a lot of bust potential for Kareem Hunt. If I had to pick a top 10 running back to potentially bust, it would be Kareem Hunt coming in at number 1. But with that being said, he still is a very good runner. And if Patrick Mahomes does pan out, then I think Kareem Hunt will be just fine. At number 11, I've got Devonta Freeman, and maybe a little bit of a surprise here, but this is a prime example of why you can't judge one player solely from the year before, whether it was a good one or a bad one. And in the case of Devonta Freeman, where he was drafted in 2017 and his results, it was a bad one. But to me, I don't think he was ever really healthy for a long stretch of time. Obviously, Tevin Coleman is still there, so that will take away some opportunities. But let's look at the positives, because there's a lot of positives here with Freeman. First and foremost, I really like the potential he has with PPR. He's still the number 1 running back, and he is used as a pass catcher as well. On top of that, for the entire Falcons team, this is applicable because we all knew they were going to take a step back after that Super Bowl loss when they lost Kyle Shanahan as well. Now they've gotten that adjustment period out of their system, and I think they will be trending up again offensively. But for me, the biggest factor here is the value that Devonta Freeman has as he's going towards the end of the second round, which to me is still an absolute steal because I think he will be a border top 10 fantasy running back. At number 12, I've got Christian McCaffrey. And quick disclaimer here, because we're talking PPR rankings right now, but if it were standard, I would have McCaffrey much lower, maybe 5 or 6 spots lower even. And if you think I'm being too harsh, just think about this. McCaffrey is 100% a pass-catching running back first. That's how he was used last year. And even though the coaching staff is saying that his usage will most likely go up with Jonathan Stewart being gone, consider the fact that CJ Anderson was added, so that doesn't bode well for Christian McCaffrey and his red zone usage. On top of that, Cam Newton is still the quarterback under center for the Panthers, and I don't care what you tell me, I don't care who the offensive coordinator is there, who the coach is. The best opportunity for the Panthers to score from whatever down and one it is from the goal line is to hand Cam Newton the football and have him quarterback sneak it into the end zone. That's just plain and simple facts. Now, the other reasons why I have some concern with Christian McCaffrey is with the weapons that the Panthers are adding offensively, I think that will take away some targets from McCaffrey. Greg Olsen is back healthy, Torrey Smith was added, and then so was DJ Moore, a first-round wide receiver. So you know that the Panthers are going to look to him to justify that selection. And as well, on top of that, Andrew Norwell was lost in free agency, so that offensive line isn't as good as it was last year. Christian McCaffrey, a name to know in PPR, because I think that running ability and that pass catching ability might cancel each other out when it's all said and done, but a guy that I would probably avoid when it comes to standard league. At number 13, we have got LeSean McCoy. And this is an interesting name because last year, Shady was a top 5 pick pretty much. Now, a lot of things have changed since then. Tyrod Taylor no longer there. So that ability for the quarterback to extend the play and get the ball out, possibly to the running back, no longer really there in my opinion. Now, honestly, I think this will be Shady's team offensively. He will have to shoulder the load. I do like him as a boost in PPR options because even if a quarterback is there that isn't necessarily the best version of Tyrod Taylor, he will still find LeSean McCoy to some degree. It's just that I think defenses will be able to zero in on the fact that LeSean McCoy is the Bills' best chance offensively, and they're going to stack the box on him. I think it might very much be a situation where a couple years back, Todd Gurley really struggled after coming on strong his rookie year. For that reason, I have some concerns about LeSean McCoy. I have him a little bit higher at 13 in PPR formats, but I would knock him down a couple spots in standard league. At number 14, I've got Jerick McKinnon. And while this was a guy that I really liked going into the season, there is a lot of bust potential here as well. The reason being is his draft stock has been going higher and higher, as I've seen him go somewhere at times even in the middle to start of the second round, which is way too high considering the fact that he just got paid an extremely large sum of money and he's always been a career backup. Now, it'll be interesting to see what he can do with the 49ers and that up-and-coming offense led by Jimmy Garoppolo. But he does get a boost because this is PPR and he has always been a good pass catcher. We will see what happens. As far as standard rankings go, I would knock him down several spots in favor of a guy like Jordan Howard. At number 15, I have got Joe Mixon. And the Bengals struggled mightily last year, led by issues on their offensive line. But even with that, Mixon was getting some crazy high usage and rewarding fantasy owners towards the end of the season. Now, I do expect that to level out a little bit as the Bengals did improve their offensive line, and Andy Dalton should have more time to get the ball out to guys like AJ Green. But at the same time, Jeremy Hill is gone, so Mixon is the man. I will say, if you draft Mixon, go ahead, insure yourself with a guy like Giovanni Bernard. I like the potential of Joe Mixon, especially in PPR leagues. He's a guy on the rise, and very much so like his value going towards the middle of the third round. I think he's a guy running back 2 at the moment, but has running back 1 potential. At number 16, I've got Derrius Guice. And I do think right around here is another division of tiers for these running backs, but I really do like the potential of Guice in Washington. They did use a higher pick on him to get him on that team. They haven't had a steady running back for a while. I do, however, have some concerns with their offensive line being a little bit shaky. Alex Smith being new to the team, and the presence of Chris Thompson, who was still a very good PPR option last year before he got hurt. But I do like the potential of Guice. I think he could be a very serviceable running back too, and I see him comparing maybe to a guy like Kareem Hunt if he gets it going in the season. At number 17, I've got Ajayi, and oh boy, how things have changed after a year, because this time in 2017, he was an end of the first round kind of selection. That is no longer the case. In my eyes, he's more of a standard running back as far as formats go. Doesn't offer too many advantages in PPR, but there are still some things going his way. First and foremost, LeGarrette Blount is gone, so he should be the guy, even though guys like Darren Sproles and Smallwood are still there, so that is a little bit concerning. On top of that, the Philadelphia Eagles offense is more pass heavy, as we saw last year, but the biggest thing is he has been giving very good ADPs for owners. So if you're looking for a lower end running back too, I think Ajayi would fit that role. At number 18, I have got Jordan Howard. And I think a very similar player to Ajayi as far as comparisons go. He was being drafted again around the end of the first round in 2017. And now fast forward to 2018, going around the same position as Ajayi. more of a standard running back as well, not too much of a pass catcher. That's what Tarik Cohen is there for. The Bears did heavily upgrade that offense, so that could benefit Jordan Howard. It'll, in my opinion, come down to the play of that offensive line and, more importantly, to Mitch Trubisky. Personally, I am not sold on Mitch Trubisky quite yet, but Jordan Howard still running back 2 upside. He has put up over 1,100 yards in the last 2 seasons. At number 19, I have got Kenyan Drake. And Drake is a guy that got a big boost after the departure of Ajayi last year, along with some injuries at the running back position. But he was able to put it all together as, especially towards the end of the year in PPR formats, he had some very strong performances. Now, I do expect him to be the main guy in Miami again, but I really do think that Miami offense will have some troubles. I'm not too high on the Dolphins this year, and that's why I do think Drake is going to struggle a little bit, because the Dolphins will be limited. I don't see them having that explosive of an offense, especially with Jarvis Landry gone. That's why I think Drake is a running back 2 tier kind of guy. At number 20, I've got Marlon Mack, and this is a guy that I'm very excited for this year, a guy that I'm going to try and get on every single roster of mine, maybe big boomer bust guy, but nonetheless, I really like the potential because last year in the limited action he had, he looked very good. Now, this was at a time where Frank Gore was still on the team. That's no longer the case. Where Andrew Luck was absent, Luck will most likely be back this year, and where that offensive line was in shambles, but the Colts hit that hard during the draft and free agency. So hopefully with all of that, Mack should have every single opportunity. He looked good as a runner and as a pass catcher. The big question is, who will come out from training camp and from the preseason as the clear-cut number 1 guy? If it's Mack, I am riding the Marlon Mack train all the way to the bank. At number 21, I've got Rashaad Penny. And to me, Penny is more of a flex play than anything else. And I even say that with a lot of caution. And I know he was a first-round selection for Seattle. And all the stories coming out of there is that he will have every chance to be a 3-down back and to be the guy in Seattle. But I still can't get past the fact that that Seattle offensive line has been in shambles for a while. The only reason they have been potent or somewhat potent offensively is because of the Houdini magic of Russell Wilson. Now, I will say Penny to me is a boom or bust guy, someone that I would probably stay away from, but if that offensive line gets it figured out in Seattle, he can be a nice pickup. At number 22 and 23 respectively, I've got Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis. Now, obviously both these guys are teammates on the same squad, but the reason I have them together other than that is because they are options 1A and options 1B as stated by the coaches, which makes it very hard for me to differentiate between both of them and to separate them in any other way. Now, obviously, Dion Lewis has been a guy that's been accustomed to that tandem role. Now he's in a new system, but with a guy that he recognizes from New England and Vrabel. And Derrick Henry, he had DeMarco Murray to contend with. That's no longer the case, so he's got a little bit more experience. The thing is, I know a lot of people are excited about Derrick Henry. I will say a lot of his success last year came on big chunk yard plays. Those are very hard to duplicate, so that's something to keep your eye out on. If one of these guys does, however, get injured, the other guy becomes so much more valuable. So potentially someone that you could stash and play as a flex, but I think they will be hard to count on week in and week out. At number 24, I've got Alex Collins. And Collins finished the year in 2017 as the main guy for the Ravens. But still, there were times where one week it was the Collins show, then it was the Buck Allen show, and then other weeks it was the Kenneth Dixon show. So it was very hard week in and week out to know which one of those guys would really get it going. On top of that, that Baltimore offense is far from potent. I do like some of the additions they had with Michael Crabtree, to name some, and then some of the additions offensively through the draft. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that Joe Flacco versus Lamar Jackson battle. But at this point in time, I'm staying far away from that Baltimore offense, and that includes Alex Collins as well. Finally, at number 25, I've got Tevin Coleman, running back number 2 for the Falcons behind Devonta Freeman. A lot of people like to play him as a flex option when the Falcons offense is hitting on all cylinders so that he can get in on the action as well. But I still think he is very touchdown dependent in my opinion, so hard for me to rely on him week in and week out. But I will say, if you have Devonta Freeman, definitely go ahead, add Tevin Coleman on your roster, because you saw what happened last year. If Freeman gets hurt, Coleman is more than capable of carrying a team as the primary running back. He is the most valuable handcuff in fantasy football, go ahead. Even if you don't have Devonta Freeman, Tevin Coleman could take a spot on your bench, no problems. And with that, we come to an end at this look of my personal top 25 running backs for this upcoming fantasy football season. Let me know what you guys thought. Did you agree with these rankings as far as PPR formats are concerned? And also as far as some of that standard analysis as well. Did I list some guys too high, too low? Did I omit some guys? Let me hear it, whether you agreed or disagreed in the comments section. And if you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and keep a lookout for future positional ranking videos as well.